Welcome to Essay Writing Explained, Reasoning. And in this segment, I will be joined by a special co-host,
Ms. Tormala. Hey, girls.
Remember, an argument has three components: a logical claim, evidence that supports that claim, and reasoning that links the claim and the evidence together. In this segment, we will take a look at the third part, reasoning about your argument. Reasoning is the piece of your argument that convinces your reader. It does the persuading. Quotes do not become evidence without reasoning to link them to your claim. I want to talk to you about some of the common pitfalls that inexperienced writers can fall into. The first one is, and this is the most common, that they provide no reasoning at all. And this is a problem because without reasoning, you do not have an argument, just a bunch of claims standing next to a bunch of quotes. So let's take a look at an example here. I'm going to show you our claim followed by a piece of supporting evidence from the text. In our previous segment, we discussed why this is a strong piece of supporting evidence, but look at it without the reasoning. Does it alone persuade anyone? We'll read it together. Knowles heightens the tension in his most emotionally charged scenes by juxtaposing them against straight-laced, conservative, uber-traditional background settings. In doing so, Knowles creates a state of contention which hints at looming emotional turmoil. Knowles writes, "He turned away, and I followed him into an underfurnished dining room of high-backed chairs, rugless floor, and cold fireplace." Standing alone, this evidence really doesn't convince anyone of anything. It needs reasoning to persuade. Which leads us to our second common pitfall, and that is that repetition is not reasoning. For example, suppose that our claim was followed by the evidence below. Knowles writes, "He turned away and I followed him into an underfurnished dining room of high-backed chairs, rugless floor, and cold fireplace." This quote describes a lifeless room. The dining room is empty and cold. This is not a room that anyone would feel comfortable in, so it is lifeless. Inexperienced writers might look at the reasoning that follows this evidence and think, hey, it looks pretty good to me. The writer has explained what the quote is saying. But there's a problem. There's a person that would agree with you, and that person is, that's right, it's Captain Obvious. And that's the problem. Remember, this is a piece of evidence that you are attempting to link to your claim. Your job is to persuade, not explain or restate the content of the evidence.
So here's another detour that inexperienced writers often take at this point in their argument, the plot summary. For example, taking the same piece of evidence, Knowles writes, "He turned away, and I followed him into an underfurnished dining room of high-backed chairs, rugless floor, and cold fireplace." In this scene, Jean and Lepper are meeting at Lepper's house for the first time since Lepper enlisted. They are going to have an argument, and Jean will run away. Again, inexperienced writers might think that it seems logical to include this information. But remember who your reader or audience is. Your teacher. I promise she, or he, knows where in the plot that this scene takes place. Reasoning, not summary, should follow evidence. So if reasoning isn't repetition or plot summary, then what is it? Reasoning is like the glue in your argument. Without it, there is nothing to hold your argument together. It's like when you're working on an equation in math. If you simply write the equation, followed by the solution, without showing your work, then you have not shown your thinking, which is what you're actually being evaluated on. So let's talk about this piece of evidence that we've been working with so far. When we look at it, we want to point out the details that actually add to the meaning. For instance, high-backed chairs, rugless floor, and cold fireplace. What is it about these details that actually helps link this piece of evidence to the claim that we're making, which has to do with the juxtaposition of the highly emotional events with the settings that are sort of the opposite? Well, clearly this piece of text really has to do more with the setting aspect of our claim. So we've got these high-backed chairs, which make people sit very uncomfortably. We have a rugless floor and a cold fireplace, both of which create a sense of discomfort and lack of warmth. What's interesting is that because this is a dining room, that seems contradictory to what a dining room should normally offer, which is a sense of family or community. So now we have to put all of these pieces together by reasoning about how this setting connects to our claim. So now let's put it all together into a much better example of reasoning. Knowles writes, "He turned away, and I followed him into an under-furnished dining room of high-backed chairs, rugless floor, and cold fireplace." Knowles highlights the sparse, uncomfortable furnishings of the room. High-backed chairs discourage guests from sitting too long. A rugless floor and cold fireplace emphasize the lack of warmth and humanity that a dining room might normally be expected to offer. By having Jean and Lepper begin their emotionally charged confrontation in this austere, uncomfortable environment, Knowles builds tension toward the brewing emotional storm that lies ahead.
Let's take a look at how we did this. So, in our very first sentence, we talk about how Knoll highlights the sparse, uncomfortable furnishings, the high-backed chairs that discourage guests from sitting too long, the rugless floor, and the cold fireplace. And even though technically we are repeating elements from the quote, we're not just simply laying them out there or restating them for our audience. We are reinforcing how he is using these elements, discouraging guests from sitting too long, emphasize the lack of warmth and humanity. So it's not that you're never permitted to repeat an element of the quote. It's just that repetition alone is not reasoning. Let's take a look at the second sentence here. This actually offers a little bit of context. So we talk about how Jean and Lepper are beginning their emotionally charged confrontation. So that gives the reader a signal of where in the story the scene takes place without completely summarizing the plot. There's a difference there. And then we sort of hit it home with talking again, not about what the quote says, but what Knowles does with the quote. He builds tension toward the brewing emotional storm that lies ahead. Ms. Tormele, I think we can both agree.
Nailed it!